My new life turned into a haunted nightmare when I uncovered its cursed secrets. I never should have opened that door. It was just a stupid wooden door in the basement, hidden behind stacks of old boxes and dusty shelves. The air was thick with the smell of mold, a damp chill wrapping around me like an unwelcome embrace. I was just a normal person, you know? Settled into my new house, hoping for a fresh start. Everything felt right until that moment. Where the hell was that whisper coming from? It echoed against the stone walls, low and raspy, like it came from the shadows lurking just out of sight. I forced myself to breathe steady, calm. I'd left my life behind for this house, and I wasn't going to let some stupid rumor about ghosts frighten me. The town said this place was cursed. I thought they were just tales to scare kids. I stepped closer to the door, curiosity gnawing at me, pushing me forward. My skin prickled. Cold air seeped through the cracks, pulling me in. I lifted my hand, trembling slightly, and gripped the rusty doorknob. It felt alive under my fingers, thrumming as if it had a heartbeat. Was I really about to do this? But the whispers, they twisted in my head like a hot knife. I pictured faded faces, their eyes haunting me, begging silently for release. Suddenly, a creaking echoed through the basement. Is anyone there? My voice was shaky, barely escaping my lips. Nothing. Then, a soft thud, like something heavy had shifted behind me. My heart raced, panic surged in my chest. I couldn't turn around. My surroundings felt wrong in a way that put a lump in my throat. The shadows danced like they had a life of their own. I moved to the door, ready to push it open. Just one tiny peek. I needed to know. My breath quickened. I finally twisted the knob. It clicked. The moment stretched, every second a torment. I pulled the door open just a crack, and a wave of stale air rushed past me, smelling of decay and dust. And then, I saw a glimmer of something in the dark. A figure, just a silhouette at first. But it was moving closer. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. I should have closed the door, bolted it shut. Instead, I just stood there, frozen. The shadows flickered. The air shifted again, heavy, like it was filled with dread. That's when I heard a low rumble, like thunder, rumbling through the very walls, resonating in my bones. My heart pounded like a war drum, a scream bubbling just beneath the surface. My hand trembled uncontrollably as I grappled with the door, wanting to slam it shut and run away, but I didn't. I couldn't look away as the figure stepped forward, half enveloped in darkness, a face twisting with agony. My scream exploded into the air, shattering the morning silence, echoing down the empty halls. And just like that, a door slammed. But not the one I could see. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The echo of my scream faded into a chilling silence, and in that instant, every hair on my body stood on end. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned my head slightly, half expecting another figure to materialize in the darkness. The deeper shadows in the corner seemed to flicker, pulsating like the tainted heart of the house itself. Get it together, I whispered to myself, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my fear. The door remained ajar, revealing only more darkness beyond. Something inside me, however far more tenacious than rational thought, urged me to see what lay within that abyss. I took a step forward, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. My heartbeat hammered with each footfall, and I felt an oppressive presence watch me and suffocating. I peered through the narrow opening again, muscles taut, ready to bolt if necessary. The room beyond was dimly illuminated by what, I couldn't tell. The walls were draped with ancient cobwebs, weaving intricate patterns like eldritch graffiti. Shadows seemed to slither along the floor, coiling around my ankles. And there it was again, a whisper, close yet disembodied, chilling my blood. "Help us." It beckoned, thin and ghostly. The pitch wove through the layering of shadows, filled with a sorrow that slashed deeper than mere fright. "Who are you?" I croaked out, my own voice sounding foreign in the quaking dark. The only response was a palpable silence, a lack of comfort that felt almost deliberate. My stomach twisted, the truth clawing at might was the same voice I had heard before, just more desperate now, tinged with a note of despair. Then, from the corner of my eye, movement. A fleeting shape darted deeper into the room, right where I had been too afraid to look. With a frantic surge of adrenaline, I pushed the door the rest of the way open, the rusty hinges protesting with a scream of their own. I stepped inside, trembling as a wave of icy air enveloped me. The whispers grew louder, merging into unintelligible words, a dissonant choir of longing. My skin crawled. Behind a stack of old crates, I caught sight of something more corporeal, a child's toy, an old porcelain doll with a cracked face and hollow eyes that seemed to follow me. I could have sworn it smiled. "Please, don't," I heard myself plead, instinctively retreating as the whispers intensified, a chorus of lost souls rising against the stillness. "I won't hurt you." But in my heart, I knew it was too late for reassurance. A sudden shudder reverberated through the house, rattling windows and loosening dust from the rafters, making it shower down upon me like cursed snow. The grating voice returned, more insistent now, "Help us before it's too late." In my panic, I turned to flee but found the door I had entered through vanished, replaced by smooth, unyielding wall. Fear and rage collapsed into a visceral scream, a primal sound echoing through the chamber as the shadows thickened, taking form around me that I stumbled backward, colliding with something soft yet unyielding. Breath seized in my throat when I felt fingers wrapping around my wrist, cold and damp. "Join us," the voice whispered again, right next to my ear, sending a cold shiver dancing down my spine. I twisted, fighting against the grip. The flickering darkness became host to faces emerging in agonizing clarity, lost souls trapped between the realms, their eyes wide with terror and hope intertwined. And in that moment of visceral disbelief, I remembered something else, something chilling. The door slamming shut, the memories of the townsfolk whispering about missing people, their faces never passing the threshold of memory. Only one thought ripped through the darkness: what if I became one of them? The weight on my chest pressed tighter just as the shadows lunged, not towards me, but towards the other side of the room. My breath quickened. What was happening? Then, there was a quiet sob, a heart-wrenching sound that felt almost familiar. "Don't let them take me," a voice cut through the chaos as a small figure emerged from the shadows, thrashing, kicking, screaming. I fell back against the wall, unable to tear my eyes away. And in that moment of realization, the child's face twisted towards me, eyes wide and knowing. "It's coming for you." Too, just as the shadows seized the figure, I felt the walls vibrate around me, a deafening roar flooding my ears, and then the lights flickered, plunging everything into pitch blackness. In that suffocating void, a presence loomed, and I knew it was my turn to scream, but the sound caught in my throat as a familiar whisper enveloped me, promising darkness. The last thing I heard before everything went silent was the breaking of glass. And a low, mocking chuckle, echoing through the darkness. Darkness cocooned me, a living entity that seeped through my skin and filled my lungs with a stagnant chill. I was suspended in a void, a world where time folded upon itself like a crumpled page, offering no clarity, only horror. My heart raced, a wild metronome beating against the cacophony of my whirring thoughts. Each fragile breath tasted stale, suffused with a metallic hint that echoed the aftermath of broken glass. Was it truly the windows, the mirrors, or something worse, something that thrived on fear, on memories? I pressed my back against the wall, expecting every exhale to summon some festering spirit from the darkness, yet nothing stirred except the echo of my racing pulse. The whispers began again, circling me like insects in a thick fog. Their urgency unraveling my sanity. "Help us, it's coming, join us." They were fragments of lives lived long ago, voices both mournful and reproachful, wrapping around the ghastly memories that clawed at my thoughts, trying to pull me down into their abyss. Suddenly, a flicker of light ignited the space before me. I squinted against the glare, where fragile outlines began to shape, swirling in a miasma of anguish. The dim glow revealed a figure small, haunted, and somehow familiar. As the shadows receded slightly, the child's features came into sharper focus. It was the same face, the same panic-stricken eyes I'd seen earlier. But now it was distorted, fingers clawing at the air as if trying to break through a barrier unseen. "Please. You have to help me." It shrieked, the words desperate, laden with fear that reverberated through me like a cold touch. "Where are you?" I managed to choke out, a pitiful echo swallowed by the darkness. "What do you want?" The figure swayed, lips trembling as new shadows wriggled from the corners of the room, forming tangible shapes that oozed malice and intent. "It watches. It waits." The child screamed, pointing toward the encroaching shadows. "You don't understand, it wants what we are." Panic surged, and I braced for the imminent crunch of bones, of cold fingers wrapping around my throat, or dragging me back into that bottomless pit. Yet, as I focused, the shadows seemed to pulse, reacting to the very terror I had cultivated. "What do you mean?" I whispered, bearing the weight of disbelief and dread. Suddenly, the house seemed to shift. The air crackled with tension, and I swayed, feeling pulled into a fraying dream. I turned back to the figure as the glimmer ebbed, the light faltering against encroaching darkness. "Stay with me," I begged, reaching out with the last vestiges of my courage, but the child's face contorted into a mask of fear. The shadows pulled at it, gnawing while it fought against the void. "It's here!" The child shrieked, and behind me, a low growl reverberated, an ancient sound, damning, packed with rage and hunger. The world fractured around me, and I spun to face the Saursay, a massive shadow creeping like smoke, tendrils snaking outwards, weaving into form. Hot breath washed over me, a rancid wind whispering secrets in my ear, flourishing with promises of demise. I backed away, steeling myself as terror coursed through my veins. Terror morphed into determination. I needed answers, needed to fight. "What do you want from me?" I screamed into the abyss, clenching my fists as if they could ward off the looming monster. "Balance, it seeks balance," echoed the voices of the doomed, rising like a shrill crescendo, pleading and mocking in equal measure. "You cannot escape the cycle, you are already part of it." I felt it then, the cold seeping deeper as tendrils grasped at my ankles, paralyzing me. "No," I cried, shaking my head. "I won't be like you." But the shadows howled, swirling around me in a flurry of desperate faces falling into despair. "It is our fate. It will be yours too." With sudden clarity, an ugly truth sank into my core that for every soul it consumed, it needed another to fill the void. I realized too late that this house wasn't just a structure, it was a predator, feasting on panic, on sorrow, drawing its strength from the darkness that resided in us all. And before I could comprehend the enormity of this revelation, a crack echoed in the silence, and the shadows lunged, tearing at the seams of reality. I lost my footing completely, falling into an abyssal chasm as the darkness swallowed the remnants of my world, and the child's shrill scream echoed until it dissipated into the void. But deep within that dark pool, a flicker of my own desperation ignited. "Someone help me. Please." I cried, but my voice was devoured, lost in a tempest of shadow that descended faster than I could run. Then, the faintest glow emerged in the distance. Among the chaos, I could see Ida door unlatched, light spilling through its cracks like honey beneath the shadowed facade. A chance. I surged towards it, my heart hammering in my chest, desperate for escape. Yet, just as I reached out for the cool knob, I felt icy fingers wrap around my throat from behind, a visceral grip that stilled my breath and held me in place. "No one leaves," the hissing whisper rasped against my ear, pulling me backward as the door swung shut, sealing the light within, leaving me once more in the choking darkness of the house. And just as I resigned myself to the encroaching fate they promised, a haunting truth sparked through my mind: the door had never truly been there for me to escape. The last thing I heard was the echo of laughter, a painful reminder that the darkness would always find a way to keep its secrets, and I was merely another story in a house that thrived on the sorrow of its prey. The abyss retreated, and chaos settled around me like fog rolling off a desolate moor. The spectral laughter echoed, a cruel symphony composed of despair and malice. My heart beat a frantic rhythm as I staggered back, grasping at the edges of reality, trying to cling to the thread of hope that had wavered but not completely severed. In that moment, the whispers grew louder, tearing at my sanity with a piteous urgency. Join us, they sang, a macabre lure that coiled into my mind, promising solace for my gnawing fear. I dropped to my knees, the floor cool and unyielding beneath my palms, and allowed the shadows to creep closer, enveloping me in a shroud of dismal certainty. What did they want? I fought against the crushing weight of inevitability. Get out! I screamed at the void, but it only laughed in return, mirthful and malicious. The shifting darkness surged with a new clarity, forming outlines of gnarled faces twisted in countless expressions of anguish and horror. I wasn't alone within these accursed walls. They were all trapped within me, shadows of the lost, victims of the insatiable hunger that had fed on our despair. With horror pooling like acid in my stomach, I realized the truth I had long evaded. I was now part of their cursed tapestry, woven into a narrative that played out through lifetimes of torment. From the depths, resonating as if from the very foundations of the house, a low rumble began, a heartbeat, ominous and deep, echoing my own trepidation. The child's visage flickered back into view, drifting like smoke, its once desperate face now a mask of resignation. You didn't heed the warnings. You shouldn't have come here, it rasped, staring at me, wide-eyed, as if searching for a spark of recognition. Why? My voice cracked, iron claws of regret twisting in my throat. Why are you all trapped? The shadows shifted, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to leer at me, mocking my naivete. It feeds on the memories we left behind, on the essence of fear. To break free, one must take the place of another. The chill seeped deeper, tightening around my core. I scrambled to my feet, barely aware of the tendrils creeping toward me, like hungry serpents drawn to their prey. I shrieked, staggering backward. I refuse to be like you. The laughter crescendoed, pealing around me like a tide, and I turned, desperate for an exit. The luminous doorway flickered momentarily in the distance, but it was more ephemeral than before. Muffled cries of anguish from the shadows urged me forward, pulling me with an unseen force that threatened to swallow me whole. Help me! I cried desperately, my voice barely piercing the layers of sorrow that hung heavy like fog. I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon me, alive with an unholy hunger that threatened to obliterate my will. And then I saw a glimmer of hope amid despair. Please. I'm not like the rest of you. I can help. With every stuttering breath, walls began to pulse. The very fabric of the house seemed to respond to my plea. I reached forward again, grasping at the flicker of light, as its warmth began to ripple back towards me. Had I angered the shadows? The eruption of their fury surrounded me, whispering and shrieking, a cacophony of wrenching voices. You cannot leave. You must feed it. No. I shouted, clenching my fists. I will not sacrifice another. But as the shadows bore down, a cacophony of lost souls melded together, their forms mingling, entwining with mine as I fought to access the flickering warmth that shone like a beacon. I could feel a pull, a magnetic force that tried to tug me back into the void. A figure emerged from the swirling mass, unexpectedly materializing alongside the threads of despair, a glimpse of the child, but now its face mirrored my own. You must make a choice or you'll vanish too. What choice? The walls shuddered at my indecision. I struggled as the shadows clawed at me, dragging me toward a singular conclusion. An urgency spiraled deep within my core, demanding I confront what I profoundly dreaded. The pulse of the house throbbed vehemently, resonating with a dark hunger that soared through me. You are part of the dark legacy. They sang, harmonizing in a dreadful pitch, a symphony of fate that was unbearable. Help us return. Become one with the shadows. In the turmoil of it all, I spotted a rusted mirror at the end of the hall, a reflection flickering amidst the chaos. And in that mirror, I saw not just myself but all of them, faces intertwined, pleading. The realization crashed over me like a tide. Every choice I made could either condemn or liberate, sealing them in an eternity of suffering or breaking the cycle. But with the house's grasp tightening around my throat, the decision raced toward me like a storm. No. I lunged toward the mirror, reaching for the salvation I hoped lay hidden within its shards. Would it hold the answers, the power to set both me and them free? Yet the shadows were quicker still, lashing out, their talons sinking into my skin, locking me into their grip, where reality unraveled and the air turned hot with desperation. As I neared the mirror, it fractured under the weight of despair, splintering into realms unknown and horror unimaginable. I felt the fabric of my existence teetering on the edge of oblivion, tethered only by the fleeting hope that this leap could grant the release demanded from me and empower me to escape my own cursed fate. But as shards of the mirror shimmered with unearthly light, a voice rose up from the depths, cold and heavy, like the tolling of ominous bells. No one escapes until the final soul is fed. And with that declaration, the shadows surged forward, a tidal wave of anguish and insatiable hunger, dragging me into the mirrored void where destinies collided, and I began to understand the true horror of the house's dark secrets. In that moment, the light within the mirror flickered one last time, revealing a new layer of shadows lurking beyond. The last thing I saw before being engulfed by darkness was the haunting visage of my own face, grinning suddenly and mercilessly back at me from the depths. I fell into the shattered mirror, its edges cutting through the fabric of reality, dragging me into a tumult of memories and shadows. The air around me crackled with a malignant energy, wrapping tighter around my limbs as I plummeted into a world of darkness beneath a sky swirling with blotted-out stars. The screams of those I'd encountered echoed through the void, warping into distorted wails that gnawed at my sanity. As I landed hard on a surface that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, I realized I was not alone. Figures materialized from the shadows, their forms blurred and ethereal, flickering like dying flames, desperately reaching out to me with hands that begged plead for salvation or revenge. I couldn't tell. But all their eyes bore the same shared horror, a gaze that told me they had been there trapped, just as I now was. Help us. One cried, but the words twisted into a howl, morphing into the cacophony of despair that enveloped the void. I could barely comprehend the multitude of faces, as they swirled around me, a tormenting vortex of souls longing for release. Why won't you help us? Another voice broke through, a sharp whisper slicing through the noise. I turned, trying to locate the source, but only met with the same convoluted mass of sorrow. You're just like us, it continued, almost mockingly. You have the blood of the forsaken, leave me alone. I shouted, panic clawing at my thoughts like the grasp of those shadows I'd left behind. I stumbled backward, and my foot connected with something cold and hard. It was a child's toy, a faded wooden horse, vibrant colors dimmed by time. As I picked it up, a wave of memories crashed over me, laughter, warmth, and a life that seemed both distant and achingly familiar. The toys were scattered around me, forgotten relics that belonged to people either trapped or long since deceased. Each held memories, fragments of lives consumed by the house's insatiable hunger. With trembling fingers, I brushed the dust from a small, rusted bell. The moment I touched it, I felt a rush of recognition. The sound of a chime had once washed through these corridors, laced with joy and innocence. Suddenly, the shadows around me began to shift and coalesce, forming a singular shape that loomed before me, a monstrous silhouette clad in despair. You take from us, yet you reject our legacy, it hissed. The voice reverberated deep within my bones, echoing the truth that I was reluctant to confront. I was entwined in their plight, a vessel for their pain. Why can't you let go? I asked, desperation cracking my voice. Why can't you just move on? The figure let out a sound that resembled a tortured cry, resonating through the void and fracturing the air with raw emotion. We are tethered to the place we once called home. Until the final soul takes our place, we cannot be freed. I shuddered, every fiber in my being screaming for escape as the weight of their collective sorrow bore down upon me. A deep dread crawled beneath my skin. Their truth was a suffocating coil tightening with every heartbeat. I won't become like you. I shouted defiantly, although I could already feel the tendrils of despair creeping into my mind. Then you will join us, came the echoing laughter, a cruel symphony of the damned. The shadows swirled ever closer, anticipation crackling in the air like a charged storm. I felt a surge of panic as they converged upon me, the darkness becoming relentless, an army of lost souls inching me towards some unspeakable fate. In the midst of it all, a sinister thought clawed its way into my mind, the very thingum I had fought against. Perhaps everything I had endured, every loss I had faced, had led to this moment. It wasn't just the house that sought me. Deep down, maybe a part of me longed to understand my connection to this place and these tormented beings. From the furthest shadows, a woman's face emerged, her features cracked and broken, luminous eyes filled with grief. You must make a choice, she intoned, her voice silky yet wrought with sorrow. Embrace the shadows and shatter the cycle, or refuse and become part of us. Around me, the air thickened, pressing in as if the very walls closed in. The cries of the damned crescendoed into a monstrous roar. My heart raced. The shards of glass I had been lost among now surrounded me, reflections of despair glittering like stars fallen from grace. That I took a deep breath. Which path would I choose? Before I could process the implications, the ground beneath me trembled, and I was back on the cusp of the mirror's surface, fragments of shimmering light swirling around me, threatening to draw me back into my own reality, or deeper still into the abyss that I can't stay. I whispered, my pulse racing as shadows reached out, stretching like fingers of smoke, clawing for my very essence. The last thing I heard before the light collapsed into darkness was the chilling truth that slithered between the spaces of dread. One way or another your soul is destined to join us. There's no escape. And just like that, the ground erupted beneath me, swallowing my screams as I plummeted into an unending silence, unaware of the fate that awaited me in the dreamlike haze of shadows I had begun to call home. When I awoke, it was not the gentle embrace of dawn that greeted me, but a stifling darkness heavier than before. The high-pitched cacophony of distant wails washed over me like a sickening tide. The memories of the fractured spirit still clawed at my mind, each whisper more insistent than the last. I gasped, scrambling to my feet, but the ground felt like a living entity, writhing beneath me, blurring the lines of reality. The air was thick, saturated with an unyielding chill that seeped into my very bones. Something was different this time. I was not just an observer in this nightmare, I was part of it. As I stumbled forward, I realized the landscape had morphed. The endless void was now interspersed with grotesque remnants of the past. Shadows danced along the horizon, forming unnatural shapes resembling the broken lives that once inhabited this cursed realm. That I pressed onward, shaking off the tendrils of darkness that reached for me with such fervent desperation. I need to find a way out, I muttered to myself, trying to anchor my spiraling thoughts in the starkness of my purpose. Yet each step felt like an affront, as if the ground resented my existence. The whispers grew louder, pooling around me, an agonizing chorus of lost souls. Their sorrow dug deeper into my consciousness, anchoring me in a disorienting wave of regret and despair. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught the corner of my eye. I turned, heart hammering in my chest, and saw a flickering light in the form of a lantern, swaying gently like a beckoning hand. Drawn by an instinct I couldn't quite refuse, I moved toward it, feeling the shadows coil tighter around my limbs as if urging me to abandon this futile path. The light grew stronger as I approached, illuminating a path carved through what appeared to be an endless field of gravestones, each etched with names long since forgotten. The lantern flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that twisted and turned into faces, pleading silently for recognition. Help us, they seemed to whisper, but this time their voices were muffled, drowned out by an overwhelming sound of rhythmic thumping, like a drum beating in time with my heart. The atmosphere shifted, a spectral wind rising, swirling dust and whispers around me, revealing flashes of an abandoned house, its windows glimmering with anguish. This house, the one that had pulled me into this despair, stood at the farthest edge of the graveyard, arms outstretched, welcoming me back home. No, I gasped, a wave of nausea crashing over me. I recognized its architecture, rotting wooden beams, crumbling bricks, a yawning maw of darkness where the front door had once been. It looked more alive than ever, as if the very essence of the souls trapped within it called to me with despairing grace, but even more disturbing was the urgency in the air. I hurried toward the lantern, praying it would provide a means to escape the suffocating dread suffused around me. As if receiving my unspoken plea, it surged forth, leading me to a clearing enveloped in an otherworldly glow. Enter, came a commanding voice from nowhere and everywhere, caressing my ears with a sweetness that churned my stomach. Claim your legacy. The surroundings shifted violently as swirling shadows took form, revealing the phantoms of the damned, the very souls I had encountered before, their faces twisted with agony, mouths wide open in silent screams. I stood frozen, rooted in their collective pain, each grieving face a reminder of my own vulnerabilities, the memories I had tried so hard to forget. I felt their eyes devoid of hope burrow deep into my soul. It was then that I noticed a figure in the foreboding doorway of the house. Peering through the threshold was the woman from before, her form both beautiful and tragic. She gestured toward me, as if to say that the choice was mine. In that moment of hesitation, the lantern's light flickered and dimmed, casting the clearing into darkness that crawled like serpents around my feet. Panic surged anew, and I sprinted toward the house, driven by an instinct more primal than fear. I was being beckoned deeper into the clutches of the night. Suddenly, an overwhelming roar erupted from the shadows, drowning out the whispers and drowning me in an ocean of sorrow, ominous and all-encompassing. The truth unfurled in my mind like a grotesque flower. Everything I had feared, everything I wished to escape, was now my only tether to the world. As I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me, sealing the darkness with a deafening thud that echoed through the halls. "What have you done?" The woman's voice resounded through the corridors, drawing me into a room pulsating with bitter memories. I stumbled blindly into the heart of the house, which throbbed with life, an entity feeding on the agony of souls entwined with my own. Before I could respond, the door behind me creaked open, revealing a set of hollow, hungry eyes staring back, filled with otherworldly longing. "You chose poorly," the disembodied voices wailed, reverberating through the walls. The shadows began to coalesce into a tangible form, murky and grotesque, closing in around me. "Now you will be part of the legacy," they whispered, the language slithering between the ill-fated souls surrounding me. As their icy fingers wrapped around my wrists and ankles, an unbearable sensation coursed through me, as if they were pulling at the very essence of my being. Dread swelled within me, and I roared in defiance, fighting against the tide. But just as the vortex threatened to consume me, the lantern flared brightly one last time, illuminating the room. With a scorching light, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in a cracked mirror mounted against the wall. The image made my blood run cold. I was no longer just a bystander. I was transforming, merging into the very shadows that had sought to claim me. In that moment, the last pieces of my humanity began to fracture, slipping away as the house pulsed with its dreadful heartbeat. And just when I thought I was utterly lost, I heard a final, chilling scream, echoing through the darkness. It was my own, and it was only then that I realized I was no longer alone. Behind me stood the monster, a silhouette birthed from the deepest pit of despair, the embodiment of every soul that had ever been consumed by the house. "Welcome home," it whispered, stretching its arms wide as if to embrace me in an eternal night. I stood paralyzed as the figure twisted in the shifting shadows, its features indistinct yet horrifyingly familiar. A grotesque mockery of the woman I had followed before danced through my mind, her essence entwined with the darkness that enveloped me. The specter slowly approached, its bray the rancid wind whispering secrets only the damned should know. "Your destiny has always been intertwined with this place," it intoned, voice echoing like a torrential downpour, drenching me in despair. Each word sank deep into my spirit, drawing forth memories buried beneath layers of guilt and remorse. I recognized snippets of forgotten conversations, echoes of joy tainted by sorrow, flickering images of bliss now tarnished with horror. "Who are you?" I shouted, desperation lacing my words. "What do you want from me?" "It's not what I want," it snarled, lashes of shadow writhing like vipers against the walls. "But rather, what you desire, the malignancy of truth buried in your very soul. We are bound by blood, you and I." The room trembled at its proclamation, the floorboards creaking beneath the weight of hidden histories. I backed away slowly, realizing that the air itself was thickening, constricting around my throat like a vice, squeezing out my pleas for salvation. Panic subsumed me, and in a desperate bid, I turned, sprinting toward another door on the far side of the room. "Run from your reflection," the creature bellowed, laughter dark and triumphant surging around me like a tidal wave. Its voice layered upon itself until it became a cacophony of torment, a harmonious blend of the anguished souls that had given this entity life. I threw open the door and stumbled into a corridor stretching endlessly into the darkness. Shadows clung to me, clinging like wet rags, pulling me back with an insatiable hunger. The approach of footsteps echoed behind, distinct yet at odds with the silent wails that surrounded me, thumping against the walls as if in anticipation of a gruesome reunion. The corridor began to twist and warp, turning into a maze of grotesque mirrors, each depicting a time and place that threatened to swallow me whole. I caught flashes of my childhood home, memories that morphed into landscapes dripping with sorrow. I saw my father's face frozen in horror, my mother's eyes wells of despair, familiar scenes painted with layers of grief that settled upon my chest like lead. I staggered forward, hoping to find an escape, but the whispers rose again, flooding my mind with their sorrowful cries. "You cannot flee what resides within," they echoed, tugging at the frayed edges of my sanity. The truth will claw its way home. As I pushed through the reflections of my life, the walls closed and around me, a consciousness aware of my every heartbeat. I had become prey, ensnared by the very fabric of the house, haunted by my own essence made manifest through the memories I had long tried to suppress. Then, in a moment of sheer terror, the echoing laughter ceased. It was replaced by the stillness of waiting dread. I turned, my breath coming in shallow gasps, and found the corridor splitting into two paths, one dimly lit, the other cast in a shadow darker than the night. The choice paralyzed me, the decision like a weight on my chest as the walls seemed to pulse with malevolence, but before I could decide, the lantern that had guided me earlier flared to life, flickering defiantly against the encroaching darkness. It hovered just ahead of me with almost sentient awareness, beckoning me toward the brighter path. And yet, across the dank corridor, I could feel the chilling caress of despair pulling me toward the abyss of shadows, where the monstrous figure lurked. My heart thundered in my chest, the curses of the house rumbling around me, urging me to stay. Embrace your fate, they hissed, our legacy lives on through you. With a sense of dread engulfing me, I sprinted down the illuminated route, desperate for any semblance of hope. The shadows upped their assault, swirling about my legs, whispering haunting melodies that promised clarity in exchange for submission. But I could hear the monstrous laughter grow louder in the darkness behind me, like thunder dictating my dread. Then, as I neared the end of the corridor, a scream exploded from behind me, own scream, and I dared not look back. The walls shook like a living beast, and just as I felt the tendrils of shadow wrap around my waist, something powerful surged within me, a resistance forged in desperation and undying will. But before I could fully grasp my strength, darkness engulfed me, lifting the very ground beneath my feet like an insidious wind. I flung out an arm in a futile effort to grasp the edge of the doorway, when suddenly an unrelenting force slammed into me, and I was propelled backward. The lantern shattered in a shower of light, dispersing the shadows as I was snatched into the void, swallowed whole by the whispers of the damned, and in that moment, I realized I had made my choice, and the true horror was just beginning. I emerged from the void, gasping as cold air sliced through the remnants of darkness that clung to my skin like cobwebs. I lay sprawled on a frigid stone floor, heart racing, pulse echoing in my ears, yet no coherent thought could surface above the roar of adrenaline. All around me, shadows flickered as if directly responding to my fear, crawling along the damp walls that seemed to breathe with an unearthly life of their own. The room I found myself in was unlike any I had encountered, an ancient basement lined with warped plank shelves, each sagging under the weight of old books, jars filled with unidentifiable substances, and vials that shimmered under the faint, flickering torches that sputtered ineffectually in the corners. The air was thick with a strange, metallic smell. Rusted iron mixing with decayed wood engulfed my senses, leaving me lightheaded and terrified. Just as I staggered to my feet, the soft thump of something tumbling echoed through the gallery of dust-covered relics. I turned, heart sinking deep in my chest at the sight of a large, tattered leather book that lay open on a table, its pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen breeze. Letters scrawled in an archaic tongue spiraled across the pages like insidious fingers beckoning me closer. I hesitated, the echoes of laughter from the shadows still wrapping around me. The specter had promised nothing but torment, feeding off my very essence as it screamed of legacies and families entwined. My eyes darted around the dimly lit space, uncertain as to whether I was alone or if the horrors that haunted me were merely biding their time, waiting for me to let down my guard. In a momentary lapse, the pull of curiosity overcame my dread. I cautiously approached the book, heart pounding in sync with the oppressive silence. As I leaned over the pages, a familiar name leapt out, me own, intertwined with ominous warnings and delusional tales of power drawn from the very shadows that stalked me. Seeker of truth, beware, the words whispered in my mind, twisting unnaturally. For the price of knowledge is steep, and shadows thrive on the suffering of the seeker. My breath hitched in my throat, trembling with the realization that whatever this was, it was meant for me. Suddenly, the floor quaked beneath my feet, and the shadows surged, coalescing into a mass that pulsed with terrifying intent. They morphed into a figure, the same grotesque parody of the woman I thought I had outrun. Its eyes pulsated with an ominous glow, glimmering with a sinister delight. "Do you see?" It rasped, voice a chilling echo that reverberated off the damp stone walls. "You are bound to this legacy, born from it and driven by it. You cannot escape what you are." I staggered back, mind racing as I felt an icy tendril wrap around my ankle. Panic flared, and I frantically lunged toward the door on the far side of the chamber, pounding against it, only to discover it locked with a heavy weight that defied my pleas. The echo of laughter returned, mocking me as I struggled against the unyielding wood. Seeking an exit? The figure purred, shadows undulating like liquid night. You've already opened the door to your fate by choosing to heed the call of this cursed tome. The truth beckons, and it is demanding recompense. The shadows thickened around me, and I felt the floor shift again, pulling me toward that oppressive darkness. I gulped as panic twisted my insides. I had to remain steadfast, but every instinct screamed for me to flee. Then, as if summoned by my desperation, a vision crashed over me, vivid and horrifying. I saw my past play out before me, a string of shadows and whispers connecting every choice I had made, the faces of the lost mirrored in every moment. This was my family's history, my mother, her anguished pleas echoing in my ears, my father, his silhouette swallowed by darkness in a desperate act I had never understood. My heartbeat thundered as I realized the weight of their suffering rested upon my shoulders, and the cursed secrets I sought to uncover were slathered in their blood. The figure lunged forward, sibilant whispers coiling around my throat. You can't know everything, child. Some truths are better left in shadows. Just when I thought I was lost, I felt a surge of warmth radiate from the book behind me, pulsing with a desperate urgency that contradicted the chill gripping my heart. The shadows hesitated momentarily, and I seized the moment, gripping the tome with both hands. Before I could comprehend what I was doing, I pulled the book close to my chest as I closed my eyes, whispering to myself a litany of promises to find answers, to break the cycle. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as if my determination scorched them like sunlight. But with a loud crack, the world around me began to fracture. That I opened my eyes to see the walls splitting, black gravel gaping wide open, revealing a yawning chasm of darkness that called to me with shrieks of the damned. My heart raced as I teetered on the precipice, the shadows writhing below. It was a choice I had to make with the weight of my bloodline and the haunted memories bearing down on me. Would I confront the truth, or fall into despair? As I took a breath, ready to step into the unknown, I heard a scream pierce through the darkness, one that was uncomfortably familiar. Help me, and just like that, the choice was no longer just mine alone. The faint echo of the scream reverberated through the cavernous chamber, clashing with the terrors that spiraled around me. My breath caught in my throat constricting as I grasped the tattered book with trembling fingers. The voice was unmistakable, me sister, Elena. She had vanished weeks ago, swallowed by the same darkness that taunted me now. The yearning to help her surged through my veins, igniting a flicker of reckless courage amidst the paralyzing dread. Elena. I cried, the sound swallowed by the churning shadows. The world around me swayed, the chasm below teeming with darkness that chewed at the edges of my sanity. Each second spent teetering on the brink fed my terror, the shadows whispering sweet lies of despair and inevitability. Help me. Her voice pierced again, crystalline and desperate, tethering my sanity to the haunting void. I couldn't let her suffer, not after all we had endured. Trembling, I forced myself back from the edge to survey the ancient room, searching for a path, anything that might lead me closer to her fading voice. The shadows shifted, coiling tighter, revealing fragments of past horrors, the wretched faces of family members lost to spiraling madness, screams muffled by the very darkness that swirled around me. A tapestry of despair woven from the threads of my lineage. I gripped the book tighter, feeling warmth seep from it, pulsating like a heartbeat. As if my thoughts had summoned it, fragments of memory flooded into view, unraveling before me. The day Elena had brought home the strange trinkets, aged and covered in hieroglyphs, only to discard them upon my warning. Those artifacts had been pieces of this very legacy, leading her dangerously close to the truth I now sought to grasp. Could she have stumbled upon the same knowledge that had awakened this horror? Fighting back the surge of memories, I turned back to the gaping chasm. Shadows roiled inside it like a storm, dark tendrils reaching up, eager for a taste of my fear. I focused on Elena's voice, following that sacred thread through the chaos. Hang on, please. I shouted, desperate to catch her lingering spirit somewhere in the void. The image of her face washed over me, young girl's innocence shattered too soon. The more I called, the more the shadows writhed, weaving a maddening horror that felt alive, absorbing my hope and despair, shifting unpredictably. Would my next words lead to salvation, or to her doom? something in the room shifted with an oscillating hum before I heard her voice again, stronger this time, though still distorted. "I'm trapped. Please, I can't see, hold on." I shrieked, adrenaline surging through me. "Where are you?" A silent scream pooled within my chest as I felt power surge from the tome, connecting me to the darkness surrounding me. The shadows, however, seemed to pulse with an insatiable hunger, sensing my distress and feeding upon it mercilessly, taunting me with visions that danced in and out of focus. Suddenly, the shadows coiled tighter, forming into a ghastly Visagian echo of my sister, her eyes sunken and hollow yet flickering with an eerie light. "You can't save us," the figure croaked, voice harsh and indiscernible. "It's too late. It will always be too late." Ravenous dread coursed through me as terror clawed at my insides. "No. I won't believe you." I felt the warmth of the tome flare against my chest, sending tendrils of light spiraling into the inky darkness, igniting the shadows that writhed like smoke in a tempest. The shadows recoiled, hissing in rage, and in that moment, I glimpsed her, through a shimmer a figure trapped in a cage of darkness, her eyes wide with panic. "Elena." I felt a surge of strength course through me, propelling me forward. The shadows screamed in agony as I fought against the tide, desperate to reach for her fading presence. With determination, I opened the book, allowing the ancient words to flow from my lips, igniting the air with an ethereal light that clashed violently against the consuming dark, but as the incantation took shape, the loss I felt clawed back at my heart. "You can't change what has already been written," the shadowed figure of my sister warned, a sickly smile curving its lips. "We are bound to this fate forever." Just as her image faded further into the depths, a sudden pull yanked me backward. The chasm shuddered violently, shadows congealing and twisting, and with them, the earth fractured even more, splitting wide as if the tale of my family was hungry for roots to its darkness. As I slipped toward the ever-cavernous maw of despair, a revelation struck. Meth prison was not merely a physical cage but a manifestation of our curse. The price for knowledge was not just freedom but the terrifying chance at brutal truths that sought to trap me as they had my sister. In a final desperate pulsing of warmth from the tome, I realized the last vestiges of our bond flickered like dying embers. If I let go now, my sister would vanish into the abyss with no hope of return, but as I grasped for a feeble light, the ground shuddered once more, and the whispers of the shadows became a deafening roar. "You will never be free," they screamed, their embrace tightening like a noose around my heart. The shadows converged, dragging me back as Elena's plea echoed one last time with haunting clarity, "Don't leave me," and then, the chasm below imploded, swallowing everything whole: me thoughts, my sister, the tainted legacy, all spiraling into a realm of darkness that promised no return. But beneath the silence, a chilling whisper lingered, clawing at my sanity, leaving me with a final, paralyzing thought: what if I wasn't just losing her? What if I had just become her? The cold weight of despair cloaked me like a shroud, pressing down with an intensity that drained every desperate breath from my lungs. I stood in what felt like a trance, staring into the ravine that had consumed my sister and, in an unimaginable twist, swallowed a part of me too. The memories, flickering moments of her laughter, the warmth of her embrace echoed grotesquely in my mind, morphing into cries of anguish as the reality of my helplessness sank in deeper. Where was she now? What had that darkness turned her into? A wave of nausea rose in my throat. I staggered backward, feeling the cold stone of the basement walls brushing against my skin, reminding me of my prison. But I was too overwhelmed, riding on the cusp of emerging madness, memories cascading in and out of focus. I gripped the cursed book tightly, its pages whispering promises of salvation laced with every soul it had devoured. "Legacies," it had said. "Curses, find her," I whispered to no one. "Bring her back," but even as I said it, I felt the warmth of hope disappearing like smoke in the wind. The shadows pulsated, writhing in sinister anticipation, longing for my defeat. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled from the depths, a bone-deep sound vibrating through the earth beneath my feet. It urged me to move, to run, yet every instinct told me to stay rooted to this spot. Every ounce of will echoed, pleading for escape. I turned, confronting the churning void, heart strained as the walls twisted and shifted around me, revealing an entrance that seemed to beckon with a honeyed promise. But it was a trap, wasn't it? One I had seen play out before. I was lost in a cruel loop of desperation, spiraling around the echoes of lost souls tethered to this accursed house, a hotbed of nightmares waiting to ensnare the unwary. Then, a vision tore through the chaos. Elena's face again, the fear in her eyes exploding into the threads of my reason. I was slipping too. The darkness beckoned, whispering sweetened lies, nearing with every heartbeat. My resolve frayed, and the weight of acceptance flooded me. A voice echoed in my mind, calling from somewhere deep, a whisper that sent ice through my veins. You can save her, it crooned, dark and seductive. You just need to feed the cycle. No. I snapped, voice cracking as despair seeped into my heart like poison. I won't be another offering. The shadows rippled, their hunger intensifying as every word soaked in dread, swirling like a tempest around me. My breath hitched painfully, the urge to give in clashed with an instinct more primal than fear. What if Elena had not been sacrificed but transformed? I recalled how the house twisted reality, how memories forged into shadows that loomed. Perhaps, just perhaps, understanding the truth meant confronting the deepest part of myself. Steeling myself, I thrust the book outward, opening its pages wide. Knowledge coiled within the texts, ancient and bittersweet, a spark of defiance against the shackles binding me. A flash of insight gripped me. What if this was not merely about finding her but about discovering the nature of our bond? The price of knowledge weighed heavy in the air as the shadows closed in around me, a suffocating vice echoing with a desperate demand for surrender. Embrace who you have become, they hissed, voices serrated and sharp, pooling around me. That I felt the force of their despair, and in that moment, clarity struck. What if the cycle continued not through affliction but through understanding? I gripped the book tighter, reciting an incantation I barely understood, letting the power surge through me, mixing my essence with that of the restless souls around. The residing darkness urged me forward, solidifying the connection. The ground trembled beneath me, and a blinding light erupted from the pages of the book, illuminating the walls once more. I saw them clearly now, faces of those who had come before me, entangled in a cycle forged in despair. Then, a realization like a bolt of lightning. I had associated the shadows with imprisonment, but meaning had twisted. Shadows held births, rebirths, tales were etched within darkness, every instant woven in precious light. Stop! I cried, voice rising above their chorus. I will not join you. This is my truth, this is our truth. And at that moment of rebellion, a shattering cry rang through the air, reverberating within the shadows, and in the darkness, the figures began to morph, warping from anguish into something more, memories taking form, threadbare yet vibrant. Suddenly, I felt her presence, flaring with warmth like a beacon in my heart. Elena! I screamed, and through the hall of mirrors, I reached for her image, placing her within the light spilling forth from the book. With every ounce of determination, I imbued it with our shared history, the innocence of childhood, the love that had once bound us together amidst the suffocating darkness, and the shadows recoiled, agony laced with confusion echoed around me. This cannot be. They shrieked as if torn between the light and their endless hunger. I saw Elena's face flicker, pained yet brave. I pressed onward, channeling all the memories, a tapestry woven not just from despair but also from love, together. I shouted, and her face steadied, hope reflected in her eyes. I could feel the darkness beginning to splinter, and I pulled on that connection, the force of intent, of shared pain, at once pushing back against the darkness. Together we break this cycle. The pulse of despair thundered in response, the air thickening with resistance, an explosion of shadows crashing against the barriers forged by light. Then, in a terrible flash, the shadows lifted as if stripped of their very life, revealing us both standing amid the radiant glow, entwined within the culmination of our very existence. But as the light enveloped us, a singular truth emerged with terrifying clarity. We were home now, yet part of us remained in the shadows, frayed edges yearning for liberation, lingering whispers wrapped in memory, a never-ending cycle. What was worse, the truth that we had broken free, or that we remained entwined with this cursed legacy forever? In that moment, we understood, hearts aligning in a deathly rhythm. No escape existed. Instead, we had become the guardians of the secrets borne by darkness, entwined in the tale of the house. And in the depths of my mind, the realization unfurled like gnarled tree roots digging deeper into forbidden soil. The binding legacy of sorrow had claimed me, and even freed, I would forever linger within the shadows. Elena turned to me, and as her lips twisted into a knowing smile, the last remnants of dawn flickered and faded. The door's echo of despair beckoned us both back into the void. "Welcome home," the shadows whispered in unison, an eternal chant echoing through the very marrow of our souls, weaving us again into the fabric of forgotten stories once more. And as the false dawn slipped into the embracing night, I understood the true horror wasn't merely the life I thought I was shedding. The true horror lay in the irrevocable truth that I had become part of the story, a never-ending cycle of lost souls seeking their peace, always finding, and never quite escaping what waits in the dark.